After the success of Spider-Man 1 the movie, Sony and the world were eager to jump right into a sequel, set to release in 2004. Alongside this movie would be another tie-in game, published by Activision and developed by Treyarch, the same people who created the Spider-Man 1 game. This sequel game wouldn't feel derivative of what they did in the first game though, because this time they had an ace up their sleeve. That ace being their technical director, Jamie Fristrom, the creator of Spider-Man 2's innovative swinging system. Jamie helped develop the Spider-Man 1 game, but felt underwhelmed by how Spider-Man was swinging in it, stating to usgamer.net that, "It's practically flying except it draws some cosmetic webs in the sky, and so it's like, oh, that doesn't feel like being Spider-Man. That's not super cool," and that's when I went off and sort of locked myself in my office at night and started prototyping what I thought would be cool. This prototype formed the basis of what we know today, where Spider-Man's webs would stick to buildings instead of clouds. Jamie actually had this new swinging prototype ready during the development of the Spider-Man 1 game, but by the time the prototype was ready to show, they were already too far into Spider-Man 1's development to implement it. Still, everyone who saw Jamie's prototype loved it and desperately wanted to use it, and the decision was made to hold off on it until Spider-Man 2 the game. When it was finally time to jump into Spider-Man 2, the team at Treyarch were ready to dive deep into Jamie's new swinging concept. However, they wanted to add some additional flair to the swinging besides just having webs attached to buildings. Their goal was to replicate the feeling you get from Spider-Man fully traversing the city the way he does in the movies. In another quote from usgamer.net, Jamie further describes how the movie influenced their thoughts. One thing I think the movie version did show us, which was a pretty indispensable part of the Spider-Man 2 experience, was sort of the running along the walls that he would do. It wasn't just that he was a big pendulum going from wall to wall. He was doing some other dramatic stuff, sort of like it was an extreme sport for him, and that definitely informed Spider-Man 2 a lot. To accomplish this, the team added extra traversal mechanics like web zipping, wall running, and even air tricks to really give you the feeling of being Spider-Man. Outside of creating this new and innovative traversal system though, the team at Treyarch also had the challenge of creating a fully open world for players to explore. This was a relatively new idea, influenced by Grand Theft Auto 3. Matt Rhodes, writer and designer at Treyarch, gave this quote regarding that challenge. "Initially, there was a lot of resistance to the idea of doing a streaming city. It was tech we didn't have, it's obviously very complicated to do that. Creating an open world was something not only had we never done it, very few people had ever done it." In another quote from Jamie Fristrom, he further describes their open world compared to Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto 3 at the time was pretty flat, and because it was flat, they could stream in districts as you arrived at them, and you wouldn't really be able to tell that they weren't there before. So that was our big technical challenge. If you're on top of a skyscraper and you're looking across Manhattan, there should be something there. You shouldn't just fog it out, you can't just have nothing. So we had two levels of detail. We had these sort of hazy, blocky buildings in the distance, and then the detailed ones would load in up close. With their new traversal system and fully explorable open world in place, the team at Treyarch had accomplished their goal of creating a sandbox in which you could finally feel like Spider-Man. But what about the rest of the game? As far as the story, it primarily follows the same beats as the movie, but intertwined with some original ideas from Treyarch. The game also features a recognizable voice cast, with some of the actors from the film returning to voice their characters, specifically Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus, and Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane. There's also Bruce Campbell, listed as tour guide. You might remember him as the ring announcer in Spider-Man 1 and the theater bouncer in Spider-Man 2. He's a noteworthy name due to his time as the lead in the Evil Dead movies, directed by Sam Raimi, the director of the Spider-Man films. We'll talk about their performances a bit later in the video, but for now, let's start digging into the game itself. Spider-Man 2 released in 2004 to PlayStation 2, Xbox, PC, GameCube, Game Boy Advance, N-Gage, Nintendo DS, and PSP. For this video, we'll be focusing on the console versions of the game, and the gameplay you'll see on screen came from the GameCube version, emulated on PC through the emulator Dolphin, which helped me to boost the graphics a bit. I chose GameCube this time around since it seems to have the most stable emulation currently, but the game itself is the same as the PlayStation and Xbox copies. If you're new to these retrospectives, we'll discuss the game in various categories such as story, gameplay, and audio before concluding the video. So with that said, let's begin by walking through the story.
This is my story. It's the usual thing. Boy meets girl, Boy loses girl. Boy meets another girl. Oh, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Don't think my life is all flowers and romance, though. I wish. More and more, my life is spent out here, fighting some of the worst the city has to offer. Sometimes it's just a mugger. Sometimes it's a bigger problem. This is the city I protect, New York City. It's my home, my playground, my responsibility. And this is Mary Jane, the girl next door, the girl I love. But love is a tricky thing when you live part of your life behind a mask. Fate handed me amazing powers, and I made a promise to use those powers to help people. With great power comes great responsibility. No matter how much I might wish things were different, there's only one Spider-Man.
At the beginning of the game, we see how Peter is dealing with some of the side effects of being Spider-Man. He made a promise to use his powers to protect others, but the more he embraces being Spider-Man, the more that Peter Parker's lifestyle is hindered. Most notably, how it's cost him the love of his life, Mary Jane, who seems to be moving forward without Peter. Peter's struggle with his double life is the main theme running throughout both the film and the game, as we see him come to terms with what it means to be Spider-Man. This takes us into the opening tutorial though, and it's not often that you see tutorial sections steal the show, but this one really does. As our tutorial guide, we have Bruce Campbell instructing us on how to play the game. Even though he gives us good hints, he also comes off as incredibly annoyed by the player, but in a humorous way.
Moving right along, let's talk jumping. Hold down the jump button and you'll charge your jump. This yellow bar shows how strong your jump will be when you let go of the button. You got it? You sure? You don't actually jump until you've let go of the jump button. Okay? Now go jump in a lake.
What's even more fun about this opening tutorial chapter is that there are secret lines from Bruce Campbell that you can trigger by doing stupid things. For example, I found a way to die during the tutorial.
Well, I'm not sure how you managed to die. I mean, seriously, unless you're a professional game tester, there's no reason for you to be dying yet. Oh, and if you are a professional game tester, good job. Keep up the good work, of course.
There's also a segment where you have to jump off a building so he can teach you how to web swing. However, if you choose to plummet to your death instead, he'll say this.
Ouch! I would work on that landing. Remember, it isn't falling that hurts you, it's the sudden stop at the end.
If you choose to die yet again, he'll be even more annoyed.
You're obviously having some trouble. You gotta have a point to attach your webbing, right? Make sure you're jumping near enough to a building that you'll have something to swing from, okay? Otherwise, we can't help you, pal. Watching you splatter on the ground is only fun once or twice. Maybe 3 times. Okay, it's always fun for me.
It's really awesome that these hidden details were included in the game, and they're a lot of fun to uncover. I wouldn't be surprised if there are a ton more hidden throughout the game as well, that myself and other players never found. But after successfully completing the button tutorial, Bruce will guide us through various parts of the city, like the comic book shop where you can buy upgrades, and an arcade where we can play some tutorial games. We'll also learn the basics of exploring this open-world New York City, but we'll discuss all of that a little bit later on. For now though, we'll move on with the story. Another common theme in this game is how Peter is late for pretty much everything. He gets so caught up with being Spider-Man that he forgets most of his other obligations. In this case, he remembers last minute that he needs to attend Dr. Connor's class. We're ultimately late to his class again, and he warns us that we're in serious danger of failing his class. Not only that, but it's mentioned that Peter has a paper due soon on Dr. Otto Octavius, which will be important later on. Dr. Connors is pretty interesting himself though, since he's a notable character from the comics. In the comics, Dr. Connors runs experiments on lizards in hopes of replicating their ability to regrow missing limbs. He experiments on himself, but instead of just growing his arm back, he ends up turning into a lizard himself and becoming one of Spider-Man's iconic villains. We were actually meant to see this play out in the game, but it was unfortunately one of many aspects that were cut towards the end of development. Initially, the plan was to have a fully explorable underground sewer system based around the lizard. In another quote from usgamer.net, Tomo Moriwaki describes the scale of this sewer system. We had to throw away what might have been hundreds of man-months of work in this colossal underground recreation of maybe almost like a third of the scope of the overland city. We had this super quirky, gigantic sewer system that was like a hamster maze of varying spaces that you could swing around in and crawl around in, and some of the bosses were going to be down there and we had encounters down there. It was completely insane, and probably in the last 4 months of development, it was clear that we had to cut it, and that was a sad day. Even though it really sucks that we never got this sewer system in Spider-Man 2, these ideas were later used in the next game, Spider-Man 3, so we'll get to explore that more in a later video. However, there is still a nod to these lizard levels in this game, but we'll see that a bit later on. For now though, Peter realizes that it's his birthday and he's late for a dinner with Harry and Mary Jane.
Peter, you made it! Happy birthday.
Hey, buddy. MJ and I had a bet going on whether you would actually show up.
Thanks, Harry. Hey, MJ. I'm almost afraid to ask, but who won the bet?
I did, of course. Okay, Harry, pay up.
All right. Are you sleeping all right, Pete? You look beat.
Just some late nights.
Still palling around with that murdering bug?
Harry, I know you think Spider-Man killed your dad.
He did kill my dad. Someday I'll get him for it, too. You tell him that next time you see him.
Yeah, well... Hey, congratulations on those billboards, MJ.
Oh, thanks. It's so unexpected. Everything's happening at once. The billboards, the play, which you have to come see, by the way. I'll get you a ticket for your birthday. Can you swing by later and pick it up?
Huh? Oh, swing by, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, I promise I'll go. So, what's up at Oscorp lately?
I'm heading up special projects now. We've been providing funding and tritium for one of your heroes, Dr. Octavius. You want to meet him?
Do I? That would be great, Harry.
I'll set everything up then. Hey, come on, let's eat.
During that cutscene, we learn a lot about where everyone is at in their lives, and some pretty interesting details are brought up. First off, there's the plotline from the first movie where Harry thinks that Spider-Man killed his father and still doesn't know that his father was actually the Green Goblin. Then there's Mary Jane, who is getting a taste of the high life with a successful play, the billboard, and her new relationship with John Jameson, who actually has a billboard of his own in the background. John Jameson is the son of J. Jonah Jameson, and is also an accomplished astronaut known for being the first person to play football on the moon. In the comics, John Jameson has had some notable roles as well, at one point turning into the character Man-Wolf. He also had a What If comic where he became Spider-Man instead of Peter Parker. Ironically, Jonah was actually very supportive of it. We don't see much of John in this game, but his presence looms large for Peter as the man Mary Jane is choosing to be with instead of him. After dinner though, we're tasked with patrolling the city until the next day, at which point Peter remembers that he had promised to meet Mary Jane this evening. After rushing over to her, we're still late, and Mary Jane is understandably pretty upset about it. During our conversation with her though, Peter notices some men attempting to rob a museum, so he ditches Mary Jane and goes into Spider-Man mode. After taking out all of the thieves, we're introduced to a new character.
This may not be art, but I like it.
Who?
You got nice moves for a dork in tights.
Are these yours?
Please.
Wait!
This of course is Black Cat, and we're led into a gameplay section where we're meant to chase after her. When we finally catch up to her though, she jumps off the building and escapes, for now at least. In the meantime though, we head to the Daily Bugle to see if we can get some work.
Finally, someone who hasn't been bamboozled by that media-grabbing glory seeker, Spider-Man. This Quentin Beck's a special effects guy from Hollywood. Says he's got Spider-Man all figured out.
Sounds like a media-grabbing glory seeker to me.
Oh, Parker. I don't pay you for your opinion, Parker. I pay you for photos.
Well,
Let me guess. You don't have any pictures, do you? You're fired. Come back when you get me shots of that red and blue wacko.
Even though Jameson shot us down, Robbie luckily needs some photos of the city, so we head out and take some pictures for the Bugle. After turning in our photos, we hear explosions and people screaming. This leads into our first boss fight of the game, where we confront Rhino. Rhino is a good introductory boss fight because he's relatively simple to beat, but he's also incredibly strong. He's basically testing your skills with your spider sense, since the only way to damage him is to dodge his attacks until he lets his guard down or accidentally makes himself dizzy. His health pool is pretty low as well, so he's not too long of a boss fight. Once we beat Rhino, we web him up and leave him for the police. Another fun aspect about this game is that the enemies don't immediately despawn after being defeated, so you can continue to wail on them if your heart desires. The same goes for Rhino, and he'll even show annoyance if you continue beating on him.
You guys are such a nuisance.
Come on!
But after taking our aggression out on Rhino, it's time to go meet Harry for our introduction to Otto Octavius.
Whoa.
Harry, it's good to see you again. Otto, your guests are here.
Harry?
Otto, Rose, let me introduce my good friend, Peter Parker.
It's a huge honor to meet you.
Parker? My friend Dr. Connors told me about a brilliant student of his named Parker, who can't seem to stay awake in class.
I'm sure Kurt has beaten him up enough already, Otto.
You're right, of course. This is my wife, Rosie, without whom I would be lost. She is my assistant and inspiration. Come and take a look at my masterpiece. There it is. Sustained fusion has never been possible before. Why?
Once the reaction reaches a certain point, it becomes impossible to contain and control it.
Exactly. Until now. Using tritium in the core.
Provided exclusively by Oscorp.
Yes, of course. As I was saying, tritium in the core lends the reaction more stability. And these arms are the key.
Amazing. How do they work?
Well, you see...
Peter, we don't want to keep Otto from his work.
In that case, Peter, won't you join us for dinner next time you visit? I'm sure Otto would be happy to explain more then.
I would love to. Thanks.
See you then.
It's only a brief meeting, so we spend the rest of the day patrolling the city. Later that evening, we investigate the sound of alarms going off, only to find Black Cat at the scene. We chase after her once again, and this time, she actually stays to chat for a while.
Not bad. I actually had to push myself this time.
Hand over those jewels you took.
Jewels?
I saw you leaving that jewelry store. You know, the one with the alarm blasting.
I don't have any jewels.
Wait, what's your name?
Me? I'm Black Cat. And I just crossed your path. Now, if you'll excuse me.
Whoa.
Mary Jane who? Am I right, Peter? Believe it or not, this is actually the toned-down version of Black Cat. Originally, Black Cat was intended to be much sexier, but Activision requested Treyarch dial it back a bit. This is briefly described in a quote from James Zachary, chief animator at Treyarch. We made Black Cat really sexy, and we planned on that, and I remember them coming back and saying, she's too sexy. So we had to go in and fill her out a little more. And then we had a lot of cutscenes and moves that sold that sexiness of her, so we had to go in and lift cameras and change some poses so that she wasn't swinging her hips so much. Try not to have her feel so flirty towards Spider-Man. Black Cat's sex appeal feels pretty elevated compared to everyone else in the game, so I think they still managed to get that point across. Still, it's interesting to think how different Black Cat could have been had Activision not requested changes. Moving on though, the next day, we head to the Daily Bugle again to see if Jameson has any work this time. For once, Peter has good timing, because Jameson needs him ASAP for a big event that's about to start. Apparently, famous visual effects artist Quentin Beck has challenged Spider-Man to compete against him in an arena of his own design, with the goal of proving to the world that Spider-Man is actually a fraud with no powers. We of course accept that challenge. If his name sounds familiar, Quentin Beck is the alter ego of the villain Mysterio, and his outfit here is reminiscent of his classic comic appearance, which I think was a nice touch. Quentin's first challenge for us here is to round up more criminals than him and place them in these containment centers located in the ground. We'll be rounding up actual inmates for this challenge, one of which is Herman Schultz, aka the Shocker, a villain that Spider-Man apprehended in the first game. He'll be important later, but for now it's time to show up Quentin Beck. This challenge was actually pretty fun too, and beating Quentin wasn't a walk in the park. He can grab multiple criminals at once, and I always felt like his score was pretty close to mine throughout the challenge. Still, we managed to collect more criminals than him and move on to the next challenge. This one focuses more on traversal, as Spider-Man must navigate through these moving platforms without being spotted by Beck. If you're caught out in the open, Beck will blast you with an electric cannon. If you get hit 3 times, you lose. This one wasn't too tricky, but it was a fun little challenge, especially with the wall crawling sections, where you have to accurately time the movements of the platforms to avoid falling. By the way, is it just me, or do these flipping platforms sound like some guy grunting?
Oh, please.
Nevertheless, we make it across all the platforms and embarrass Quentin Beck once again.
And as for you, Beck, stick with the movies. It's obvious reality is way too much for you to handle.
How could he? It isn't fair. He doesn't deserve the spotlight. It just isn't fair. Oh, he can't win. He won't win. That smug bug. Let's see how he likes it when I turn this cannon to maximum power. Oh! What? The laser is overheating? Oh, stupid machine! Work! Work! Come on, work!
Problems with your laser, Beck? I hear there are pills for that now.
While Quentin is having his pity party, we decide to head over to see Dr. Otto Octavius and his wife Rosie for dinner. Once there, Peter and Octavius nerd out over his fusion reactor, and like in the movie, Peter expresses concerns over Otto's ability to control the reaction. We never get to hear Otto's response to these concerns in the game, but in the movie he arrogantly just brushes off Peter's concerns, so I'm assuming he has the same mindset here. But after dinner, Peter realizes he was supposed to go see Mary Jane's play tonight, so we rush over to try and catch it in time. On our way, we come across a robbery in progress. Unfortunately, handling that robbery delayed us just enough to miss Mary Jane's play, which I think is meant to symbolize the strife that being Spider-Man has placed on Peter's personal life. To pour salt in the wound, we catch up to Mary just in time to witness her being all lovey-dovey with John Jameson.
John Jameson, what are you doing here?
Well, there's this beautiful girl in the cast.
Did she say Jameson? Someone shoot me now.
Stalking girls now? Well, that's pretty pathetic, don't you think? Or is she on your naughty list too?
Not exactly. What do you care anyway?
No reason. Just dropping by to say hi. By the way, remember those guys you beat up the other day in the art gallery?
I remember.
Well, it turns out there's a whole ring of them. I just happened to find their hideout the other day. I could show you. If you could take a break from the peeping Tom routine, that is.
Sure. I really wasn't spying, you know.
If you haven't seen the movie, Black Cat doesn't appear there and was an original choice for the game. I actually really love the idea to include her here though, because I think she does a good job at further showcasing the divide between Peter's two lives, as well as his potential futures depending on the version of himself that he ultimately chooses to be. Mary Jane is the life he could have if he fully embraces being Peter Parker, where Black Cat resembles a life focused on Spider-Man. Having a love interest on each side even things out, so I think Black Cat's inclusion in the game is very effective at displaying Peter's split lives. It also helped me to further sympathize with Peter feeling like he's being pulled in two separate directions, as well as the dilemma of having to choose one life over the other when both sound equally favorable. She's also just a really fun character to have pop up, and Black Cat always brings a lot of fun and energy to her scenes. But as promised, Black Cat leads us to the thieves loading up some stolen artwork. Unbeknownst to Spider-Man though, there's a sculpture that's caught her eye. Black Cat will fight alongside us for a while, but while we're distracted, she sneaks off and takes the statue, leaving Peter feeling like a sucker. Still, we brush it off and patrol the city. The next day, we swing by the Daily Bugle to try and scrounge up some work. It just so happens that Quentin Beck has decided to hold a news conference, and Jameson needs Peter there to take some photos. All is not as it seems, though.
What do you think Beck's got this time?
Who knows? He's a little loopy, right? Hollywood types.
People of New York, I am Mysterio. I've determined that your planet is ripe for conquest.
Mysterio?
Now I've seen everything.
Do not mock me during your fate. Your fate is sealed.
Run for your lives! Run for it!
One detail I like during this cutscene is that the theater curtain has these two eye shapes on it, reminiscent of the eye pendants on Mysterio's classic costume. But anyway, it seems that Beck has fully embraced his persona as Mysterio as a way to steal the spotlight back from Spider-Man. As Mysterio, he's giving the illusion that he's an alien from space, set to take over the world. This could be a reference to Mysterio's origin in the comics, specifically Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man number 51, which retconned Amazing Spider-Man number 2, to reveal that Spider-Man unknowingly first fought Quentin Beck while he was pretending to be an alien for the Tinkerer. In that issue, Tinkerer's plan was to bug various high-end officials to get dirt on them and sell that info to the highest bidder. Quentin Beck's role was to make it seem like aliens were responsible for these schemes to prevent any further investigations by authorities. Spider-Man thwarted Tinkerer's plan, but Beck managed to escape. Years later, Beck returns as Mysterio, where he's continuing the alien ruse. I really like the alien illusion here in the game too, and it's a really compelling segment in the game. But after saving all of the civilians from the burning theater, Mysterio informs us that his armada of aliens are taking over the Statue of Liberty, so we rush over to investigate. Mysterio is clearly up to something on Liberty Island, and luckily, he left some alien devices floating above the water for us to swing on. As we get closer, we can see that Mysterio is replacing Lady Liberty with his image. In order to stop it, we have to swing incredibly high up and destroy some alien power sources. Once all of them are destroyed, we can swing to the main platform and destroy a brain. With the brain popped, this shuts down Mysterio's invasion of Lady Liberty. He's not done yet though, since he challenges us to face him at his hidden fortress. We somehow know where that is and head straight over, only to find it's someone's apartment. It's not all as it seems though, as we find an elevator hidden behind a sliding bookcase. This elevator takes us to my favorite level in the game.
Glad no one was around to see that. Where the heck am I?
Welcome, Spider-Man. So glad you could drop in.
Hey, it's Mysterio. The cliché who walks like a man.
Silence. Prepare to meet your end in my Funhouse of Doom.
Funhouse of Doom? I thought you were an alien.
Silence. As I was saying, even as we speak, I am watching you from my hidden control room. Perhaps you can find me, if you survive. Let's begin now, shall we? Let me introduce you to my friend, Mr. Hoppenhack. Such a cheerful fellow, isn't he? You'll soon discover that he's quite the cut-up.
Here we get a new enemy type, an inflatable clown wielding an axe. He's pretty cool though, since his mechanic is based on one of those kids' toys that bounces back at you when you hit it, so you always have to be ready to dodge as soon as you finish a combo on it. It's kind of a unique way to have an enemy counter your attacks, and I thought it was a clever and thematic enemy type. But after beating the inflatable clown, we enter the Funhouse of Doom. The first room we find kind of reminds me of the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, and it eventually flips upside down. Spider-Man can stick to walls though, so I'm not sure how he managed to fall like that. Regardless, we fight more clowns in this room while we're watched by an illusion of Mysterio's face. This face illusion they created is really creepy, and I think it was a very cool idea. So far, I'm really loving everything that they're doing with Mysterio's levels. The next room we enter is a hall of mirrors, but with a twist. All the weird reflections of Spider-Man can walk through the mirrors, and they'll try and fight us, even using their own web attacks. We have to fight off all of the Spider-Men that attack us, while also attempting to break all the mirrors. Out of all the Funhouse rooms, I think this one's my favorite. It's a really creative concept, and I love how creepy it is to have the eye on the floor watching you the entire time, not to mention the floating face of Mysterio in the air. This is such a cool level altogether, and I can tell the design team had a really fun time creating these levels. But after destroying all of the mirrors, one reveals a doorway. Inside, we find Mysterio's control room with an angry hologram. There are also multiple props and costumes scattered around, one of which being that classic Mysterio outfit from the comics. Unfortunately, it seems that Beck managed to escape, so we have no choice but to hop out the window and continue our day. As we're patrolling the city, we remember that Dr. Octavius' demonstration is beginning soon, so we head straight over.
Thank you for coming, ladies and gentlemen. You are all about to witness the dawning of a new age. The power of a sun is now ours. Wait, a minor hiccup. Nothing to be alarmed about. What? Get out of here, you maniac! Rosie! No!
Believe it or not, that actually killed Rosie, so we have to shut down the power as quickly as possible. It's a fairly simple mission though, where you have to dodge the pulsing containment field as you attempt to destroy all of the control terminals. Once the power is shut off, we flee the scene. The next day, while we're exploring the city, we remember that we're late for Dr. Connor's class again. On our way, we're delayed by attacking alien robots. In the meantime, Dr. Octopus pays Connors a visit.
Help me.
Otto? Are you all right? I heard on the news that...
I killed them.
All right, Otto, just calm down. Let's call the police.
Police? No! No police!
Those tentacles. Otto, we need to get you help. You're obviously not well.
Get away from me, you traitor. What? Yeah. He wants to turn me into the police. Is this how you repay my friendship? Yes, of course. That murderous arachnid Spider-Man. He killed Rosie. Destroyed my life's work in an instant. I'll rebuild it, though, and kill him. It shouldn't have been like this. You're right. If I am a criminal, then I will have to act as a criminal to do what I must. I need money. Need to rebuild. For Rosie.
When we finally arrive, we find Dr. Connors on the ground. He passes out before he can tell us what happened, and we rush him to the hospital. In hopes of generating a lead on this incident, we head to the Daily Bugle. We're just in time as Jameson is discussing how Otto killed the doctors who were attempting to operate on him and escaped the hospital. After learning this news about Otto, we leave the Bugle and head to the bank to meet Aunt May. In the movie, it's revealed that Aunt May is at risk of having her house foreclosed on, so we go to the bank to try to find solutions. Coincidentally, this is also the exact moment that Octavius decides to rob that same bank. Peter runs off and returns as Spider-Man to thwart Octavius. Like in the movie, Doc Ock grabs Aunt May as a hostage to cover his escape. Unlike the movie, Dr. Octopus escapes via a helicopter and leaves Aunt May on the railroad tracks with an oncoming train. We rush over to rescue her and drop her safely in the park. Later, we return to our apartment and check our voicemail. It seems Jameson needs us ASAP for pictures of his son's charity event. We arrive just in time to witness John Jameson announce that MJ has decided to marry him. Right on cue, Black Cat shows up.
Mary Jane has just agreed to marry me, and I couldn't wait to share my happiness with everyone.
So what's the hunk's superpower?
He threw a football on the moon.
Uh-huh. Red is easily impressed, isn't she? Shouldn't you try to find somebody more your speed?
Just what I needed. Love advice from a thief.
Are you still sore about that statue? I gave it to the cops already. I was just having some fun with you. You look kind of cute, trying to figure out what happened back at that warehouse. Anyway, my original point was, why are you still bothering with a normal girl? Normal is boring.
Normal is half my life. At least it's supposed to be.
Why? I mean, seriously. Why settle for being some schmo when you can be a superstar?
Well,
forget it. I was gonna tell you about Shocker, but you're obviously busy sulking.
Shocker? What about him?
Oh, just that he broke out of prison a little while back and he's back in the city. I was gonna show you where he's hiding out, but...
Show me.
That's the spirit? Trust me, kicking his heavily padded butt will make you feel better.
Yeah, you're probably right. Let's go.
While we follow Black Cat, she informs us that Shocker managed to escape during our arena event with Quentin Beck. You can actually see him escape in the background while Beck is sulking. Eventually, we make it to the abandoned power plant, which serves as Shocker's hideout. This leads into a boss fight against Shocker, and he's probably my favorite boss fight in the game. There's not much to him, but he feels well balanced. He'll send shock blasts at you occasionally and run around the map, and when you finally catch up to him, you try to get as many hits in as you can before he charges up an incredibly powerful energy pulse. Getting caught in it does a lot of damage, and he'll start charging it as soon as you land your first combo attack on him. It's fun trying to gauge how many hits you think you can put in before attempting to escape, and I like this risk-reward playstyle with him. It's a bit tedious chasing him around the map, but his health pool is low enough that it doesn't drag on for too long. After doing enough damage to him, he'll realize that this is a losing battle, so he targets Black Cat as a way to cover his escape. Black Cat is fine, aside from a bruised ego, but she says she has some other things to do now, so we head out and patrol the city some more. The next day, we head to the Daily Bugle for more work.
You were looking for me, Mr. Jameson?
Parker! Where were you 15 minutes ago? There's a Latverian diplomat coming into the city by helicopter. He's landing any moment, and I need a photo. Now get over there like your job depended on it.
Got it, Mr. Jameson.
The Latverian diplomat is likely a fun Easter egg for Dr. Doom, the ruler of Latveria. On our way there, though, a pedestrian is yelling about Martians robbing a Speedy Mart. I was more interested in trying to see Dr. Doom, though, so I kept going to his location. Unfortunately, by the time you get there, Doom has already entered the helicopter and you can't see him, but Peter at least has comments on it.
I missed him. JG is gonna kill me, but maybe I can make it up if I get a picture of that alien robbery.
Having missed the Latverian diplomat, we head back to the Speedy Mart in hopes of getting pictures of something interesting for Jonah. Lo and behold, it's Mysterio robbing a convenience store. Mysterio pulls another grand illusion, this time targeted at us the player, as we see him charge up multiple layers of a giant health bar to intimidate us. In all actuality, though, he goes down in one punch.
Whoa! That was sick, dude! You rock so hard, Spidey!
Oh, I give up. Don't hit me again.
Quentin Beck, I presume. Say cheese!
Excited about our new photos, we rush back to the Bugle to show Jameson. As you'd expect, though, he's never impressed.
Parker, what do you want?
I have some photos you might want to see. Remember Quentin Beck? Turns out he was Mysterio.
So, Beck and Spider-Man were in cahoots all along.
How can you look at those pictures and say that?
I don't have time for your moral outrage, Parker. I'm trying to run a paper here and make sure my son's wedding to Jean Marie doesn't bankrupt me.
Her name is Mary Jane.
Yeah, right. I'll give you $200 for the lot. You can collect your money on your way out.
Immediately after leaving the Bugle, we hear someone yelling for help. When we drop in, they're actually more scared of us and run away. It's become apparent to Peter that the Bugle's negative articles about him have started to make regular citizens assume that he's the bad guy. This is likely a nod to the famous comic issue titled Spider-Man No More, where the Daily Bugle's negative press has caused the city to fear Spider-Man. This causes Peter to feel a lot of self-doubt, so he decides to throw away the Spider-Man suit and give up being Spider-Man. Eventually, a new villain emerges in Spider-Man's absence, causing him to rise up and take the mantle again. He also gets a brief moment to confront Jameson, albeit in a lighthearted fashion. He basically tells him that in the time that he's been away, he's just been recruiting more Spider-Men for the city. It's a great comic and was a big inspiration for the Spider-Man 2 movie. Pissed off though, Peter decides to return back to the Bugle and give Jameson a piece of his mind. Luckily, Black Cat stops us and cools us down before we make it inside. Even better, she brings news of Shocker's whereabouts. So we follow Black Cat again to his new hideout. Shocker's holed up in an old Oscorp research lab, a more advanced hideout compared to the last one. When we enter, it seems Shocker has been waiting for us, revealing that he told every lowlife in New York where his hideout was, so we'd fall into his trap. Shocker is more souped up for this battle, and generates a force field for himself so we can't damage him. With Black Cat, we work as a team to take down Shocker. Our goal as Spider-Man is to distract Shocker while Black Cat finds a way to shut down the force field. After hitting the switches to shut down his defense, we're given a window of opportunity to fight him like we did in the last battle. Like in that fight, he'll charge up a damaging energy pulse after we attack him. We'll follow the same pattern of shutting down the power and attacking him a couple of times until we take him down for good.
Was that as good for you as it was for me?
I have to admit, you were right. I feel much better.
You see? I told you, baby. Stick with me and you'll be fine. Come see me next time you're feeling down, alright? I'll see you around.
She's pretty amazing, don't you think, Shock?
I think my career has just hit a new low.
Who cares what you think?
After leaving Shocker webbed up for the police, we realize we might have just enough time to make it to Mary Jane's play. We're of course still late, but our timing is actually pretty good. As she's leaving, thieves attack Mary Jane in hopes of robbing her. We swoop in and stop them, reminiscent of the first movie. This scene doesn't lead to an upside-down kiss though, and instead, Mary Jane tells Spider-Man that she's getting married.
What are you doing here?
You know me, always hanging around.
I'm getting married. I don't know if you heard.
Oh, really? What's he like?
He's... there. he loves me, and he's there.
I see. I have to get back to my patrol. See you around.
Yeah, next time a bunch of thugs try to jump me.
It's a date.
After this awkward interaction with Mary Jane, Peter remembers that he was supposed to meet Black Cat this evening too, and we meet up on what looks to be the Chrysler building. Interestingly enough, we can actually see Black Cat in the same spot during the opening credits. This location has another Easter egg as well, since you can find bird feathers along the side. This is in reference to the first game, where we fought Vulture on this same building. Black Cat can tell Spider-Man is in a bad mood though, and suggests stopping a crime to lighten up his day. Black Cat knows that something big is going down at another warehouse, so we'll head there next. Honestly, these Black Cat traversal missions have been getting old pretty fast, so I'm glad the developers decided to change things up a bit here by making it into a race this time instead of another chase mission. She's pretty quick too and provides a good challenge, but once we arrive at the warehouse, we find that it's an auction for some powerful armored suits. Instead of using the element of surprise to our advantage, Black Cat finds it more amusing to make a dramatic entrance by announcing herself first. This throws us right into the battle against the mechs. These things are rough too, and I found them to be the most challenging enemy type in the game. They not only have machine gun turrets, but they'll also blast you with rockets that have a good-sized area of effect. The best way I could defeat them was to get behind them and attack while I could. Throw in another mech though, and it becomes even more difficult. I think these things are actually more difficult than most of the bosses in the game too. It took me a few tries, but eventually we finally take them all down. Still, Peter can't get over the fact that Black Cat blew their cover, and he ends up getting really pissy about it.
What were you doing? We had the drop on them.
It was more fun my way.
That's totally irresponsible.
What are you so upset about? We won! Well, excuse me for trying to get you to enjoy yourself. For once.
Black Cat leaves, and we swing around the city while we think about whether we should give up being Peter Parker or Spider-Man. Peter eventually comes to the conclusion that he doesn't have to quit either of them, and that he can find the right balance. After coming to this realization, he decides to catch up to Black Cat and talk to her. Once we find her, Peter basically breaks up with her.
We need to talk.
Okay. Talk then.
I don't think I can see you anymore.
Hysterical blindness?
What? Oh, nothing like that. I just finally realized something. I'm not like you. I can't live the life that you do. My powers came with a responsibility, and I need the balance of a normal life. Being Spider-Man is who I am. But being just me, that's who I am too.
Let's skip ahead to the part where you ask if we can still be friends.
Can we still be friends?
Don't sound so dejected. Once I cross your path, I'm not so easy to get rid of. Go. Find your girl. That's what you want to do, right? You finally started listening to me. You're doing what you want.
Thanks, Kat.
See you around.
Despite her alluding otherwise, we unfortunately won't see Black Cat for the rest of the game. Regardless, Peter is so excited by his decision that he rushes straight over to Mary Jane's apartment to tell her that he loves her. As you would expect, Mary Jane tells him that she's still getting married and can't handle this conversation right now. She heads back inside, and Peter realizes he was acting too impulsively. Meanwhile, Dr. Octopus breaks into Harry's office at Oscorp in search of the rare element tritium. Harry strikes a deal with him, requesting Ock find Spider-Man and bring him here. As a reward, he'll give him the tritium. Ock agrees, and Harry suggests he start by finding Peter Parker, since Peter is known for taking pictures of Spider-Man. We then return back to playing as Spider-Man and head to our apartment. Surprisingly, Mary Jane has left us a voicemail saying to meet her at the diner. We head over, but before we can discuss anything, Octavius launches a car through the window. A strange thing to do considering he needs Peter alive to tell him about Spider-Man. Luckily for Ock though, Peter survives anyway. Otto takes Mary Jane hostage, telling Peter that if he wants her to live, he'll get Spider-Man to meet him later. Having no choice but to oblige, Spider-Man shows up to meet Ock. Ock then jumps onto a moving train and removes its brakes. This leads to a boss fight on a moving train against Dr. Octopus, and it's a pretty cool fight. Aside from trying to stay aboard the train, we also have to dodge Ock's tentacle attacks and then web them to the ground. Once his mechanical arms are webbed, we're free to attack him. After dealing enough damage, Ock will flee, and we're left with the runaway train. Spider-Man saves it much easier here than in the movie though. However, stopping the train used up all of his energy, causing him to pass out. With this opportunity, Ock grabs us and takes us to Harry. Ock then takes the tritium and leaves Harry to his business.
Before I kill you, I want to see who you are. Peter? How can you be Spider-Man? Spider-Man killed my dad. My dad loved you like a son. Like a son.
Harry, we don't have time for this. Octavius has MJ. You have to tell me where he is. I have to save her.
Mary Jane. Octavius. He has a lab that he set up on an abandoned pier. She's probably there.
We'll talk later, Harry. I promise.
With Harry's intel, we rush over to the abandoned warehouse where Ock is keeping MJ. Once we make it there, we sneak in flawlessly.
Don't worry, MJ. I'll get you out of here.
Okay, not flawlessly, and that hit also knocked Peter's mask off, revealing his identity to both Ock and MJ. With Ock's fusion reaction active once again, we have to shut it down to save the city. We'll have to traverse around this busted up warehouse in order to shut down all of the control centers, while also dodging the pulsing containment field and Dr. Octopus himself. Unfortunately, shutting off all the control panels doesn't power down the fusion reaction, but it does at least remove the shield around Dr. Octopus. With him vulnerable, this leads to our final battle against him. Like in the previous fights, we'll dodge his tentacle attacks and web them up, and then beat up Doc Ock for as long as we can, often causing him to bug out. After dealing enough damage to him, Ock finally snaps out of his insanity.
What have we done? What have I done?
Dr. Octavius, we have to stop that reactor before it's too late.
This is bad.
There's only one thing to do. Get the young lady out. I'm sorry, Peter. You weren't to blame for the accident. My hubris, my vanity cost Rosie her life. Now I must set things right.
Hang on. I'm sorry I didn't tell you, MJ. I wanted to. I even tried a couple of times, but
I think a part of me always knew.
now you see why I can't be with you. It wouldn't be fair to you. I was selfish to ask you. You should marry John.
Peter.
Come on in. It's open.
Expecting someone?
MJ? You're supposed to be getting married.
I made a decision. This involves both of us, Peter. And you need to trust me to make my own choice. I know who you are. I know the life I'm choosing. And I want to be with you. That's the way it is. Deal. Go get him, Tiger.
Mary Jane. The girl next door. The girl I love. And now the girl waiting for me at the end of the day. Fate handed me amazing powers. And with those powers came a burden of responsibility. Somehow, though, having her with me makes that burden lighter. Still, in the end, it's mine to bear. After all, there's still only one. Spider-Man.
And that ends the story of the game. Overall, I think it was a pretty solid narrative. It definitely feels really short though, and I think I beat it in around 5 or 6 hours. I don't really hold that against Treyarch though, since from what I can tell, the short narrative is due to a lot of cuts that were made in the last few months before the game's release. For example, Treyarch originally planned for some levels involving the Lizard, Kraven the Hunter, and the Voodoo Priestess Calypso to appear as villains. It's a shame they didn't have time to include these levels, but a lot of those plans were later used for Spider-Man 3, so they did show up in some capacity down the line at least. As far as the story that we got in this game though, I enjoyed it, but there were definitely some areas that felt more clunky than others, namely the parts that adapt the movie. In my opinion, the game is at its strongest when it's creating its own original story beats, and at its worst when it's replicating the movie. I think this is common in a lot of movie tie-in games though, probably because the developers are given a lot less creative freedom when forced to create specific levels to match the movie. You can definitely tell that Treyarch were having a lot more fun with their original levels, and so was I. The Mysterio levels were so much fun and inventive, and they felt a lot more fleshed out compared to anything involving Dr. Octopus. His levels all felt very rushed and ended up being my least favorite ones, even compared to Shocker. I get the sense that the Dr. Octopus levels all felt like an obligation to the developers, while the rest of the game was where the excitement was. I wouldn't blame them for feeling that way either, and I think that's a major weakness to movie tie-in games in general. The writers and designers are hamstrung into recreating scenes that were meant for a film, and movie scenes don't often translate as well into games. I think that's especially apparent in the Mary Jane love arc. It's a major part of the film, but it doesn't really fit the game all that well. The Peter-Mary Jane love arc came across very forced, awkward, and clunky, and I got way more chemistry between Spider-Man and Black Cat than I ever did with Peter and MJ. So even though the scenes adapted from the movie felt the most out of place, I wouldn't say that the story is bad. In fact, I really love the original story missions, and I think they carry the story. Especially the Mysterio bits, because I think he really shines the brightest in the game. In our last retrospective, he was the main antagonist in Shattered Dimensions, and although I absolutely love that game, I think Mysterio was actually handled better here. His levels all have the most flair, and there's a lot of fun absurdity to them, mixed in with just enough creepiness to make it unnerving in the best of ways. I don't even mind that he gets taken out with one punch in the convenience store. As a kid, when I first played this game, I was bummed out that Mysterio got taken down like a chump instead of posing a realistic threat, but I think it fits the game's character well. Everything about him is illusory. He's all bark, no bite, and I like that his final move is a trick against the player as he shows us this exaggerated health bar to intimidate us. Overall, I think he was handled in a really fun way, and his scenes ended up being my favorite. I really liked Black Cat a lot too. Black Cat is to Spider-Man what Mary Jane is to Peter, and I like that contrast. I think she's a clever inclusion in that regard, but I also like the energy that she brings to each level. Everyone else in the game seems so moody, especially Spider-Man. It's nice having Black Cat pop in to lighten things up. Although the developers had to cut down how flirty she was with Peter, I kind of wish they left more of that in. Maybe because Tobey Maguire's line readings as Spider-Man sound so awkward when he tries to flirt that I find it amusing, but I think those moments are fun regardless.
You always chase girls who brush you off?
No, only the naughty ones.
I was definitely disappointed when Peter broke things off with her, but I was glad that they left the door open for her to return. It's been a long time since I played Spider-Man 3, so I don't remember if she's in it, I'm guessing not, but she's a character I would have liked to have seen again. We'll talk about the other characters a bit more when we get to the audio section. For now though, even though the main plot of the game has concluded, the story isn't technically finished just yet, as we're given another story chapter, the first day of the rest of your life. This chapter doesn't have any story tied to it and is instead just another day in the life of Spider-Man. You're tasked with patrolling the city and basically doing whatever you want, while attempting to eventually accumulate 50,000 points. There are a ton of things that you can do in the city to achieve those points, so let's next discuss the gameplay in Spider-Man 2.
The city's been quiet lately. Maybe my luck's finally changing.
Isn't it beautiful, Rosie? This will be my gift to the world. Unlimited energy. The power of a sun harnessed for the good of all mankind.
Don't forget the good of Otto. Eat something. The world will still be here in half an hour.
As much as we've focused on this story so far, the real stars of the show are the traversal and open world. For the first time, Spider-Man can attach his webs to buildings, and he can explore an open world New York City. This was incredibly ambitious at the time, and it's clearly the hallmark feature of the game. The ability to traverse in this way may seem commonplace now, but it was a big deal back in the day and really shaped the expectations for how Spider-Man should play ever since. I think that's most evident in Spider-Man PS4, which clearly took a lot of inspiration from this game, using what it did well and building upon it. Although both games have some similarities, their traversal handles pretty differently. If you've recently played Spider-Man PS4, you'll remember how effortlessly you could move around the city, primarily by just holding down the right trigger and pointing the control stick in any direction. It looks amazing, but it's not difficult. In Spider-Man 2, though, it's not that simple. Spider-Man 2 requires more skill in its traversal. You have to be more methodical with how you gauge your speed and move around the city, and there are also different button inputs that you have to keep in mind so you don't lose that momentum. For example, in Spider-Man PS4, if you accidentally run into a wall, Spider-Man will naturally start wall running. In Spider-Man 2, you need to anticipate that you're about to run into a wall, and then press the right trigger and circle to start a wall sprint. It's fun when you can pull off different combinations in the city, like moving from a web swing into a wall sprint and then back to swinging, but it definitely requires more coordination than in Spider-Man PS4. This isn't a bad thing though, and it felt really rewarding as I got better with its traversal. It's also still incredibly relaxing to just swing around the city and explore for fun. After playing more modern Spider-Man games, I was curious to see how this game's traversal held up and if it would feel archaic now, but it actually feels just as great as I remembered. There's a lot of freedom to explore the city the way you want to, and it's still satisfying to just swing around aimlessly. What Jamie Fristrom and everyone else at Treyarch was able to accomplish with Spider-Man 2's traversal was incredibly impressive, and it's easily the biggest achievement in the game. But while you're swinging around, what can you do in the city to accumulate those 50,000 points? Well, there's a lot. For starters, there are a ton of different buildings that you can enter, making the world feel more lively. Some of these areas are just various shops and restaurants, but some are also villain hideouts. For example, a nightclub where a ton of henchmen like to hang out. You'll show up and beat down the criminals, and usually there's a little token that you can collect in there as well. Finding a hideout token is worth a lot of points, and they help you to keep track of which hideouts you've been to already. There are a ton of different tokens scattered around the city, incentivizing you to explore everywhere. Some of the other token types are for skyscrapers on top of New York's largest buildings, secret tokens hidden in hard-to-see areas, and buoy tokens requiring you to jump across the water to reach them. Spider-Man can't swim in this game, so if you miss the jump, you'll scurry out of the water like a cat from a bath. It's always rewarding finding these little tokens scattered around the map, and I had fun casually exploring the city in search of them. Then there are challenges that are scattered around the city as well. These range from easy to intense and test your skills in traversal. Some require you to race as fast as you can to a certain point in the city, while some require you to perform certain moves to progress. All of them are timed, and the points you're rewarded are based on how fast you can complete a challenge. Then there are hint markers. They're not worth a lot of points, but they're always fun to find. Not only do they give you helpful hints towards things like combat and traversal, but they're also narrated by Bruce Campbell. He of course has a lot of sass while reading these to you, making tutorial hints a lot more fun than they otherwise would be. Some of them aren't even hints at all, and are just there for fun. For example, this one is my personal favorite.
Okay, here's a little piece of advice. Hang on, I need to get that. Hello? Oh, hey, baby. Well, no, I haven't forgotten. No? Well, listen, baby, it's not like that. Look, I'll have to get back to you later. This might be a while. Well, no one, baby. No, don't worry about it. Yeah, tell me about it. See, listen, later tonight.
Aside from different markers and tokens, there are also some in-world challenges that you can trigger based on Peter Parker's life, one of which is delivering pizzas for Mr. Aziz. You'll play as Spider-Man and you have to race across town and deliver all the pizzas in your bag before time runs out. One catch though is that you can't flip around a bunch as Spider-Man or it'll ruin the pizzas, so you have to be careful in how you're traversing or you'll start to lose points depending on how many times you flipped over the pizzas. These were fun the first couple times, but they start to get tedious pretty quick. However, I really love the music that plays during the challenge.
You made it! And on time.
You can also pick up work from the Daily Bugle taking pictures for Robbie. It's another time challenge where you have to race to certain points on the map so Peter can snap a photo. These were longer challenges, often lasting a few minutes each, where every second counts. They reward a lot of points if you're successful, but if you run out of time, you get nothing out of it. So I found my time was usually better spent doing other challenges in the city. Still, they're a pretty fun inclusion. There are also Mary Jane missions. You'll swing by MJ's apartment and you'll find a note left by her, typically stating that you're running late to a date that you scheduled with her. This is of course another time mission where we have to race across town and meet MJ before the timer runs out. There's not much else to this one, but it's a fun way to incorporate Mary Jane. Probably the most common way you'll be acquiring points in this game though are through random events in the city. There are two different kinds, spontaneous ones happening right now indicated by this purple icon, and events triggered by talking to a civilian indicated by this green icon. Regarding the green icon, you'll run over to a civilian who will give you a tip on a crime going down somewhere nearby. This is randomly generated and could be any number of things. Some common ones are carjackings or armored car robberies. Sometimes the civilian called you over only to have you jump by criminals, which is a cool detail. Overall, these aren't too exciting, but they are a good way for you to get some combat in when you're in the mood. Even though these missions start to get a bit repetitive, there's a big enough variety of them that they don't become annoying, and it's fun to see which crimes pop up next. To also help against too much repetition, villain-specific henchmen start to pop up once you encounter them in the game. For example, after that first Mysterio level, random events involving his alien drones will start to appear. Same with Shocker and Doc Ock's men. The most difficult ones are still those armored mechs though, and they'll occasionally pop up as events too. Even though I dreaded seeing the armored mechs, since they were the ones that killed me the most, they also pay out the best, so they're worth the time. I also really like the one where a boat is sinking in the harbor, and you have to rescue everyone before it's completely submerged. It's a unique event, and I thought it was pretty fun. The spontaneous events with the purple indicator aren't quite as intricate though. It's usually someone getting their purse robbed or someone driving recklessly. However, this is where the infamous balloon missions come from. Frequently, while you're swinging around, some kid will let go of their balloon, and it's your mission to grab it and return it back to them. It's nothing crazy, but I think it's often criticized for feeling pointless, like Superman saving a cat from a tree. Still, you can ignore them if you want, but I did find a small amount of enjoyment completing a few of these. As the balloon gets higher, it becomes trickier to grab, since you start to run out of areas to swing from. So you have to act fast to grab it, and I often had to plot out jump points and accurately time my leaps to snag the balloon. So they're not all bad. Although I will admit that the kid's voice was kind of annoying, and after doing a bunch of these, I wanted some revenge, so I got to a point where I decided to grab the balloon and just run off with it to see what would happen, and well, the balloon just pops. Aside from those though, there is one more area where you can rack up some points, but first I want to talk about combat. The combat in Spider-Man 2 is pretty solid. As you progress the game, new combos will be available in the store for you to purchase. There are quite a few of them too, so you're given some good variety to play around with. I especially like that the combat has a good balance of web attacks integrated into it as well. In fact, I think the web moves are my favorite in the game. It's really satisfying spinning an enemy around and hitting other enemies with them, or firing a glob of webbing to subdue them. However, I think air combat is the most powerful feature here, especially if you can juggle enemies for a while. I noticed that I started to favor moves that would launch enemies into the air over others, and that air combos seem to be the fastest way to defeat an enemy. But overall, you have quite a few options for taking down enemies the way that you like. The developers also integrated the spider sense into combat in two ways. The first is the typical buzzing around Spidey's head indicating that an attack is incoming. If you press the dodge button in time, you can avoid all the damage. It's pretty nice when you're faced with gunfire since Spider-Man can dodge all of the incoming bullets. If it's a melee attack, you can follow up the dodge with your own counterattack, my favorite being a whirlwind kick that damages nearby enemies. The second version of the spider sense can be triggered whenever this bar is full, and it slows down time. This makes it easier to get the upper hand on enemies, and you also get some exclusive attack animations. I also like how you have a lot of freedom with how to handle enemies in the city. In games like Spider-Man PS4, they've gone to additional lengths to show that Spider-Man doesn't kill, like by having an enemy that's thrown off a building get automatically webbed to a nearby wall. Spider-Man 2 isn't concerned with that, and if you want, you can grab an enemy, take them to the top of the Empire State Building, and pile drive them into the street. Yeah, I know it's pretty sadistic, but my point is that it's fun using the environment in ways that you can't in future games. Overall though, I really like the combat in Spider-Man 2, and although it's not perfect, I had fun with what it had to offer. But that brings me to the final challenge mode that I want to discuss in the game, the Arena mode. After beating the game, you can go to the store and purchase the arena. To use it, you'll have to go back to the old warehouse where you first fought Shocker, and there will be a little challenge marker waiting for you. Here you're faced with increasingly difficult rounds of combat aimed at testing your skills. There are 3 different types too, timed, endurance, and boss levels. Even more exciting though is that some of the cut content that didn't make it into the game are introduced here. For example, one of the enemy types that you'll face occasionally are lizard minions from those cut sewer missions. There's also a secret boss in the arena, but we'll get there in a moment. You first start with only the timed version unlocked, and as you'd expect, you have to take out a certain amount of criminals before the timer runs out. These were my least favorite of the arena challenges though, since there are already so many time trials in the game as is. Since I was being timed, I also didn't feel like I had the freedom to test out combos the way that I wanted to, and instead had to default to whatever the fastest method of beating enemies would be. So overall, I didn't enjoy the timed combat challenges, but after you beat 3 rounds of it, you unlock endurance mode, which I think is a bit better. Instead of being timed to take out a certain number of enemies, you now have unlimited time, but you face a larger volume of enemies. At first I was excited about this one, but the quantity of enemies is so high that you still can't fight them the way that I had hoped. The first couple rounds aren't too bad, but once you get to round 3 with 75 enemies and a lot of guns, I felt like I had to game the system a bit more. I found that I was taking too much damage trying to fight the enemies head on, so instead, I would web one up, take them to a rooftop or high platform, and then beat them down one by one. Maybe more skilled players can handle these groups of enemies more effectively, but I was really anxious to try out the next challenge section, the boss mode. In this series of challenges, villains are thrown into the mix. The early levels start with one villain like Rhino or Shocker amongst a small amount of henchmen. One of the bosses we'll face here is the secret boss Calypso, exclusive to this game mode. In the comics, Calypso is a voodoo priestess often associated with Kraven the Hunter. She's a tough and intricate boss fight too. She'll use a variety of magic against us, like launching fireballs or freezing us with ice. She also teleports around the map, and the only way to stun her is to find a magical staff hidden around the level. If you punch it, she'll be stunned for a moment, allowing us to deal some damage. It's pretty tedious hunting for the staff the whole time, but otherwise, she's a pretty cool boss fight, and I'm glad the developers found a place to put her in. As you get further into the boss rounds though, multiple villains start to fight alongside each other. In the final level, you're faced against all of the villains at once. Rhino, Shocker, Dr. Octopus, and Calypso. This is a really awesome level and really tests you. It's incredibly difficult though, as you slowly try to chip away at each villain. Calypso makes this way harder too, since she can really screw you over with a well-timed ice blast. On his own, Rhino isn't too tough to beat, but if Calypso can trap you for a moment, Rhino can get an opportunity to deal some massive damage. The same goes for Shocker, where I was confident I could get some extra punches in before his big energy blast, only to be stuck in place right before my exit. Even though it's a very difficult challenge round, it's also really fun, and I was surprised at how well all of the villains' attacks mesh together, almost as if they're fighting as a team. It's the closest thing we'll get to a Sinister Six battle in this game, and I really enjoyed it. But that's the gist of the arena mode, as well as everything you can do around the city. After you accumulate that 50,000 points, a new chapter will begin, the second day of the rest of your life. There are no goals anymore, and you're pretty much free to roam the city and do whatever you want now. You do get one reward for getting the 50,000 points though. If you go back to the Spidey store, there will be an upgrade available to your swing speed. This will help you to traverse the world faster and give you an edge on the game's many time trials, so I think it's a worthwhile reward to end the game with. Overall, I really loved traversing New York City and exploring everything it had to offer. It's surprisingly relaxing to swing around town, and I liked having the option to test myself with various challenges if I was in the mood. My only complaint is the over-reliance on time trials. The vast majority of challenges in this game are time trials based around traversal, and it got old really fast. I think this is another reason that I especially enjoyed the arena mode, since it felt so different from the rest of the challenges in the game. Regardless, I had a lot of fun with the gameplay in Spider-Man 2, and it still holds up today.
Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for the event of the century? Here it is, ladies and gentlemen, the man we've all been waiting for. That most outrageous of Spider-Man, the unscrupulous, good sequel, Spider-Man!
For those of you just joining us, Hollywood effects expert and Spider-Man critic Quentin Beck has issued a public challenge to the web-slinger. Bob, what do you think?
Well, Steve, it's a bold move, no doubt about it. Personally, my money's on Spider-Man.
All right, we'll have to see how it plays out. Here comes Quentin Beck now.
And now, your MC and host for this evening. You know his legendary work from such films as Cyborg Babysitter and Tears of an Alien Bounty Hunter. A man who has worked tirelessly for the entertainment of all mankind. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce that master of film magic and illusion, that expert of the unknown, the one, the only, Quentin Beck!
Thank you for coming, Spider-Man. I knew you couldn't resist.
I don't like people building a career off bad-mouthing me, Beck.
What about that newspaper man, Jameson?
JJ? He just has a knack for hiring good photographers.
At first glance, the voice cast for Spider-Man 2 is pretty exciting, with 3 stars of the movie returning to voice their characters. Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man, Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane, and Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus. As excited as I was to see them in the game's credits, I felt pretty underwhelmed by their performances. These three in particular felt like they were giving pretty flat line readings throughout the game, and I rarely felt like I got much enthusiasm or energy from these actors. I don't know if it's because their craft is with physical acting and not voice acting, or if they just saw the game as an obligation, but their performances were disappointing. So even though these three are the big selling points of the game's cast, I feel like they're also amongst the weakest. However, I still think the most jarring performance in this game is Aunt May.
Aunt May, I'm sorry I'm late.
Peter, don't be sorry. I was just worried about you.
Even though I've been knocking the voice acting so far, there are some real highlights in Spider-Man 2. My favorite out of everyone is easily Bruce Campbell, which I think is an impressive feat since his role is just to give tutorials. He brings a lot of fun to the game, and I was excited to check out a lot of those hint markers scattered around the map just to hear him talk again.
Now you probably know this already, being the expert gamer that you are. But you can charge your jump while you're swinging around. It's really handy. Just keep pressing the jump button until you're ready to jump, and then wham! Off you go. If you do it right, you can charge jump off your web and get some serious distance.
I also think that Holly Fields as Black Cat was a real standout as well. While Tobey was giving some pretty flat line readings, Holly was bringing a lot of life to Black Cat. I feel like the game immediately became more enjoyable every time Black Cat showed up, and I think that's because of the energy that Holly Fields was providing with her performance. The Black Cat character also felt like she was having the most fun in this game compared to most of the other characters. I don't know if it's the writing or the performances or both, but so many characters seem down in the dumps and moody throughout the whole game, especially Spider-Man, who feels like he's moping around most of the time. I think that's why I'm gravitating towards Bruce Campbell, Quentin Beck, and Black Cat, since I feel like they're the ones injecting the most fun into the game, and their voice actors seem to be having the most fun with their roles. Another notable voice actor, though, is Josh Keaton voicing Harry Osborn. Had Tobey Maguire chosen not to voice Spider-Man in this game, Josh very well could have been the one to take his place. Later in 2008, Josh Keaton voiced Peter Parker in the Spectacular Spider-Man animated series, as well as in the game we discussed last retrospective, Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions in 2010. Although he hadn't played Spider-Man prior to this game, I wouldn't be surprised if he was on the shortlist to play Peter if Tobey backed out, given his natural ability with the character. That's just my own personal speculation, of course, but I think it's cool to see Josh in a Spider-Man game prior to becoming a notable voice for Peter in the future. Lastly, there's also James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Quentin Beck. Alongside Josh Keaton, James would also appear in the Spectacular Spider-Man animated series, playing Harry Osborn. James also went on to voice Spider-Man himself in Spider-Man Friend or Foe. But now let's look at the music in the game. Like in prior retrospectives, I've selected 4 of my favorite tracks from the game that I think you'll enjoy as well. We'll start with this one from one of these Shocker boss fights. Next up is a track that plays occasionally during fights in the city. It's really fast-paced and energetic, perfect for combat encounters. Up next is a track that will sometimes play during different time challenges throughout the city. It's another fast-paced one that I think is perfect for speed trials. Our next one is probably my personal favorite in the game, and you'll hear it a lot through the different events that you trigger in the city. I know I said only 4, but I threw this next one in as a bonus because I think it's so cool and unique. It's the music that plays during the first Mysterio mission, and I love all the alien vibes. Overall, I really love the soundtrack in the game. It's incredibly upbeat and really energizes you throughout your adventures. A lot of these tracks are very memorable too, and I felt a lot of nostalgia as I encountered them in the game.
Spider-Man, huh? Finally! I've been dying to see what you can do. Let's go! Just try to break through my armor. I'm gonna break your bones and make you cry for your mama.
Rhino, I'm gonna take a wild guess that you're strong, but dumb.
Spider-Man 2 is one hell of a game. There's no denying that it was an incredibly revolutionary game for its time, and has really shaped the way that we expect to see Spider-Man games released now. After Spider-Man 2, it's almost been a prerequisite that future games have Spider-Man's webs attached to buildings, and that he be in a fully open world. Not every Spider-Man game after this one followed that structure, but it's what we started to expect from Spider-Man games as fans. Jamie Fristrom and the rest of Treyarch really captured the excitement of swinging around the city as Spider-Man for the first time, and it'll forever be an iconic game for that reason. For this retrospective though, I wanted to see how it would feel returning to Spider-Man 2 now that it's nearly 2 decades old, especially after experiencing the tremendously executed Spider-Man PS4 game. Is Spider-Man 2 still as good as we remember it, or does its age really show? Well, as far as traversal goes, it still feels great today. I was surprised at how much I still enjoyed swinging around the city as Spider-Man again, and I think it's worth revisiting if you've been considering trying it for yourself. The web swinging still feels unique in its own right, and I like that it doesn't hold your hand. Even though I was often crashing into buildings, I felt more in control, and it forced me to push myself to get better with my web swinging skills. It feels rewarding as you slowly get better at traversing the world, and it even became relaxing to just swing around and explore. The web swinging mechanics and open world are easily the main highlights of this game, and they still feel great today. The rest of the game isn't quite as flawless though. The story definitely struggles as it attempts to blend the narrative of the movie with its own original ideas, and those movie sections never feel quite as engaging. The story isn't bad, but aside from the Mysterio levels, it lacks excitement. It makes me really wish that this game hadn't been a movie tie-in, because I think it would have excelled even further had Treyarch been given the freedom to craft their own original story here. It's clear that they had a lot of innovative and creative ideas, many of which were left on the cutting room floor due to the strict deadline that they had to make to release alongside the movie. I think these ties to the movie held this game back, and the story in particular felt hindered because of it. The voice acting was hit or miss as well, even with some of the stars of the movie reprising their roles for the game. I'm sure their name in the credits was a big selling point, but I think the game would have been better off with unknown voice actors who fit their roles. As far as gameplay, there were way too many time trials in this game. I can't tell you how many times Peter is late for something and has to race across town in a certain amount of time, and the vast majority of the challenges are time-based. I imagine it's because the developers really wanted you to engage with the swinging system and open world, but it's a bit too much. However, I'm really glad that there are plenty of collectibles and hidden areas scattered throughout the city to incentivize you to explore at your own pace. But overall, Spider-Man 2 is not a perfect game, but it is still amongst the elite in terms of Spider-Man games. I definitely enjoyed my time replaying it, and in a few years, I'll probably revisit it again. As always though, I wanted to see how it was scored on Metacritic and compare it to my personal rankings. As it stands, the GameCube version of Spider-Man 2 is at a critic score of 80, with a user score of 84. I think this is a pretty reasonable score, and I'm not too far from it myself. I personally give Spider-Man 2 a 9 out of 10, not only because it's such a revolutionary Spider-Man game, but also because there's still a lot of fun to be had within it today. If you've been considering playing it for yourself lately, I definitely recommend giving it a try because it is such a classic, especially if you played it around the time of its initial release and enjoyed it, since I think you'll get quite the nostalgia trip. But those are my thoughts on Spider-Man 2. Since I kinda skipped around and started with Spider-Man 2 instead of 1, I think we should next circle back to that game and see how the two compare, especially with Spider-Man No Way Home reintroducing Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin to modern cinemas. So that's what's coming up next. In the meantime though, if you're looking for more retrospectives, I have quite a few to choose from, such as The Punisher, all the Marvel Ultimate Alliance games, and X-Men Legends. If you're in a Spider-Man mood, I'd recommend checking out Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions as well. And if you're looking for a community to discuss all things Marvel, you can swing on by our Discord, the link is in the description below. But anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.